Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to Retro Reviews. Today, we'll be reviewing Coming to America. This is not Coming to America. This has no numbers in the title. This is the original 1988 romantic comedy film directed by John Landis, starring Eddie Murphy, Arsenio Hall, and James Earl Jones. We're, of course, doing this in anticipation for Coming to America. That's their one chance to do that title, and by God, they've gone with it. But it's actually kind of a happy coincidence as well. There is a link from the one that we did last week, our retro review from last week. We decided to go through the Beverly Hills Cop trilogy, which was a lot of fun going through those films. We wanted to go through like a big Eddie Murphy trilogy, kind of the film series that put him on the map. And we went with that. And the last film in that trilogy, Beverly Hills Cop 3, was directed by John Landis. We didn't plan that, but that was a happy coincidence leading us into this one. And I want to say in the retro reviews history, on this channel, this is the first film that both me and you haven't seen properly beginning to end. Usually I've seen a film and you haven't, or vice versa. This one, we were both going into this completely new. So this is going to be really fun to talk about this one. We had a really good time with this one. But before we do, of course, this is going to be spoiler filled. It's just going to be a general discussion about the film. But before we dive into it, just over to George with the socials.
Absolutely, guys. As we said, we've got a lot of things coming out, and we've really enjoyed the Eddie Murphy films. Granted, we've only delved into the sort of the 80s Eddie Murphy, I guess we can say, but we want you guys to comment below this line, not just your thoughts on Coming to America, but your thoughts on Eddie Murphy. And even when the day this video goes up, the sequel's not out yet. So comment your thoughts, looking forward to the sequel. Are you worried? Are you excited? What do you want to see from it? What do you hope from it? So comment below all of your Coming to America stuff, but here we are reviewing the very first one. And as Chris said, this is the first one in its entirety. I have seen most of the film before, and I think we've both seen a lot of clips as well. As an outright first official viewing, we nabbed it, which I don't want to say is a shame. I've got a feeling if cinemas were open, they would have probably had the original one, which would have been great to have seen back to back with it. But before we get into that stuff, I'm also going to bring up our social medias, which is Facebook Cinema Savvy, Twitter at cinema_savvy, letterboxd.com/cinema savvy, and a link to TeePublic is in the description below. So check them out. As we've had a lot of Eddie Murphy content. We've also got a Coming to America, the second one, the sequel. That is going to come out at some point this week. It may be the weekend. We're waiting on a couple of variables. So if you want to know about the next film, obviously we might have a review out before the film actually comes out. And if we do, that will be completely spoiler-free, as we always keep those early screeners. So check back on the channel for that. We're going to be covering it either way, because jumping into this one, I had an absolute blast watching this properly.
I mean, I always love 80s Eddie Murphy anyway, but I'm also a 90s Eddie Murphy fan. That's kind of what I grew up with like Nutty Professor, and even into the 2000s with Norbit. We always talk about Norbit as well. Could Norbit be a potential retro review? Can we call Norbit retro? I guess we can. We did Creed 2, and that came out in the 2010s. But this one, I'll just go into the plot for anyone who doesn't know about this film. So it's an extremely pampered African prince travels to Queens, New York, and goes undercover to find a wife that he can respect for her intelligence and strong will. This is apparently a concept, a story that was created by Eddie Murphy, which I didn't know until reading up about this film. And of course, reading up about this film, you learn of a lot of drama, on-set drama, clashes in personality and direction, and you have that with this film as well. So John Landis, he'd already worked with the director before on Trading Places. Again, a film I haven't seen. Another 80s Eddie Murphy film that I need to cross off my list at some point. This was actually kind of cool with this one today. Speaking of Letterboxd, I guess this is hyping up our own Letterboxd now, but the channel ones. It's going to be nice to cross off an 80s film now on my list of ones that I've seen with this one today. And, you know, with Trading Places, there's a great quote on Wikipedia about this film where John Landis talks about how the Eddie Murphy that he worked with on Trading Places was very different from the Eddie Murphy that he worked with on this film. And I'm sure probably a very different Eddie Murphy that he would work with 6 years later when he did Beverly Hills Cop 3. I'm going to paraphrase, but he basically says that, you know, when he first worked with Eddie Murphy, he was new on the scene. He was open to ideas. He was fresh. He was new. And he'd probably work better under direction. And then X amount of years went past and we get Coming to America, and Eddie Murphy had blown up as a personality, much more success. And with that, I guess a certain ego comes with that too. And although it didn't come to like fisticuffs or anything like that, apparently there was a animosity between the two. And I'm guessing, and you sort of predicted this as well, because Eddie Murphy came up with the concept of the film and the story, maybe he felt like he had some ownership over it, and sort of he wanted the ultimate creative control over it.
Yeah, I think that's a really big thing with this. I've not seen Trading Places, which is one that my dad kept saying I should have watched, which is another great one. But you don't feel as if there's. I mean, watching the film, I'm not saying every film you can tell when actors chiming it in. This one is Eddie Murphy. I want to say is absolute best. Now that being said, when you then hear about those behind the scenes scuffles, I think because it didn't show, because it's something you'll only see by reading on about it. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but then you read what Eddie Murphy said about Landis as well. And it's very much, I mean, you know it far better than I do, but essentially he was basically saying, well, I'm the one that hired him for this film because it was my idea. And it's really interesting because normally for these sort of items, I think probably the same, me and you both tend to normally go with the director on this one, but they've been treated in a fair and whatnot. But if you've got someone like Eddie Murphy that, let's say late 80s, right at the sort of top, he's had his world tours, he's been and gone off SNL, he's got the Beverly Hills Cop films, and then he's got his own film idea, which politely put, and this is a compliment, feels like an SNL sketch for an hour and a half, and something far better than SNL deserves, don't get me wrong. And then it would make sense that, he picked the director. I mean, the film doesn't get made without him, and we don't normally have the back of the actors, I've said, but for this one, you can tell, this isn't Beverly Hills Cop 3. He's not chiming it in. He's not doing it because he has to or because he wants money. This is something he really wants to make, and that shows. And it's kind of sad reading about the sort of behind the scenes stuff that the pair of them obviously had their differences, and 5 years can change a person a lot, and it's amazing sort of reading into this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and he was saying that before this film came out, Landis had a string of 3 films that didn't perform well or were really panned by critics, and I've given him the chance to give him a film that is successful and made over $200 million, and that's because of me. And so I mean, Eddie Murphy as a personality, I think that is his, as his trait, that's his strength. He is a personality, he is a force to be reckoned with, and especially 80s Eddie Murphy, where he does have so much energy and so much creativity, and he's just lightning quick with these characters. And I mean, I haven't seen all of Eddie Murphy's films before this point, but I was saying to you before we went live, I'm wondering if this was the first Eddie Murphy film. I know he did SNL, so you can technically count that, but in terms of films, is this the first film that he did where he was playing all this like menagerie of different characters and different personalities? Because we obviously see that in Nutty Professor, we see that in Norbit, but I'm wondering if this was the first time that he did it. And you're right, I thought that as well, that it does feel like an elongated SNL skit where, I mean, I don't know how much of this stuff was scripted or if a lot of it was improvised, but because of the makeup and the staging of a lot of things, I think probably a lot of it was scripted, but especially the barbershop scenes, which were hands down like among my favorite scenes in the film and my favorite characters that Eddie Murphy plays. That feels very just roll the cameras and we'll see what comes up in the conversation type thing. And Arsenio Hall as well, I don't know much about him because I wanted to talk about him too. He's equally as fantastic, plays all these different kind of characters, is just as good as Eddie Murphy in this film, in my opinion. But I don't know much about him. I think I did a bit of reading. He's a chat show host, but I don't think he was at the time. I think that's more recently something that he's done. But I couldn't see any ties to SNL. But you get the impression that he knows him from somewhere and has brought him into this film, if Eddie Murphy did have that kind of casting control, because the two of them work off each other absolutely brilliantly.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I've not, even before this film, I think everyone knows the famous shot of the two of them getting out the car. They've got the sort of the medals on. I think it's one of the most iconic images from any comedy. Even before I knew what the film was, you knew that photo. And I've never really seen him in anything, and maybe that's on me, but he hasn't made as many films. As you said, he's done talk show host, which I was reading into at the weekend, that he had his own series role, but they came years down the line, I think in the 10s as well. So he's someone that I'm assuming he's done a lot more stand-up, or maybe he did more writing, but it's kind of a shame that I've not seen him much because he was very funny in this. And the main thing that this film doesn't work if their dynamic as a duo doesn't work. If there's no chemistry, the film won't work. It will feel flat, or it'll feel like it's so elongated towards Eddie Murphy because he is the main character. He's the one on the poster. That Arsenio Hall is there with him, and he has a very important character track that they are friends, and you've got to believe that friendship is certainly for some of these big scenes. I think obviously the really obvious one is the Sam Jackson. I don't even want to say cameo. It was Sam Jackson, one of his first roles, and the pair of them just looking at each other because they know that they can wipe the floor with him if they need to. And there's moments like that, and it could have been so easy for Eddie Murphy to have done all of it and everything, but bringing in this secondary character who can stand on his own, he can have scenes by himself. And one of the funniest scenes is the bathtub as well, I think, in the apartment. I think that's always a great one. But just the pair of them work so well with one another. And I don't want to say they're believable in a real sense because the whole thing's a mockery of it, but it feels as if there are two strangers in America and they're both discovering. And you've got the one that detests everything, the one that loves it. I think he plays that part so well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a classic trope, isn't it? Like the fish out of water story. And there are moments of that. There's the moment where they go to get a job at McDonald's and he says, like, mop the floor, and he's never done it. He doesn't probably know what a mop is, and he's just wheeling the bucket around. So there are moments of that, but it never gets too bogged down with that. I don't know what they do. They kind of skirt around that whole thing because that's sort of like the obvious thing to go about. And yes, there is some, miscommunication between people, but it didn't feel like that kind of movie. It felt like it sort of rose above that, and the comedy is a lot stronger in that, and it is completely based on those personalities. I feel like I'm probably just going to list every other character that they make because I love all of the characters. Reverend Brown's one of my favorite, Arsenio Hall's character. I love the singer, Sexual Chocolate, who I've seen in the trailer for Coming to America. So I'm really looking forward to seeing his character again. It's just so many, all of them. They were brilliant. I actually found them, dare I say, more interesting than Akeem's main character, and I was sort of clamoring for more scenes with them. So we'll see how the sequel goes because it looks like we're going to get even more new characters as well being thrown into the mix. And, we talk about, I don't want to talk too much about the sequel because we haven't seen it yet. We don't know if it's good. We don't know if it's bad. But Eddie Murphy going through this almost, we always call it like the Harrison Ford effect, like recently, where he's going back to these characters he's done. Han Solo, Indiana Jones coming out. He did Blade Runner 2049. And since Dolomite Is My Name came out, now it looks like Murphy, I guess this is the first one that he's doing, but he's going back to this pre-established franchise, and it looks like we're getting that Eddie Murphy that we remember, that one who is lightning quick, that is hilarious. You talk about the live show that he had planned as well, which I still hope goes ahead because I would love to try and get tickets and see him do some stand-up again. But yeah, it's just the comedy just works so well. The story itself is so basic. It's kind of like a prince. I don't know if it's like The Prince and the Pauper. I've never read that, but a prince. It's like Aladdin. A prince pretending that someone who's nothing pretending that he's a prince, but then she respects him for having nothing. It's like that, but reversed. He is royalty pretending to be poor, but then she's okay with it at the end. So the story itself is so basic, but that kind of works for it. And then you can just let the actors just play off each other, and that's where the comedy comes from.
Yeah, and it's kind of what you were saying as well with the sort of the multiple characters that when they're playing into the two leads, they are funny and they're well written, but you're not getting them over the top. You're not getting the, I'm not looking at Eddie Murphy's later films, but sometimes when he's a character, even like say Norbit, when there's him playing other characters in the film, that character can 180 so much because he's doing the same things he wouldn't sort of do in time with it. Whereas in this one, it feels like they're both playing these two characters, but they know that they're also playing the over-the-top, ridiculous other characters. And I feel as if what kind of helps make the film work is that they keep all the craziness for the others. And I think because it's so obviously them, they're not hiding it. They get obviously the credit moments as well, but I think they're able to sort of make that comedy be better, that they're not trying to chuck in. Because if they're writing and planning this or what stage of production, they might want to say things that some of their other characters say, and that wouldn't be right coming out of their mouths from who they're playing. Mm-hmm. And I think that sort of effect of, I don't want to say share the characters, but if they had an idea, they clearly just went with it and did it, and it worked. It was funny. There's probably loads of other ideas that maybe didn't work, and I think that's a really key part of this film is that they got that balance right, and it never veered too far in towards women. As you said, the story is very simple, and I don't even want to say a coming-of-age story, but the fictional country sort of is so easy to do because you get, I guess it's, how do I describe it? I'm not saying they go into like race and stuff at all in the film, but just the concept that the sort of Americans can almost say, oh, they just come from this poor African place. Like, they're just these two like morons that don't know the language or don't know how to like act in the real world. And I love that dynamic. And I think, I don't want to get weird and say, had they picked real countries, that wouldn't have worked. I think the fact it's fictional means they can be so much more ridiculous than they had any right being before. The fact when you've got like the petal throwers and all those kind of things, the fact it was fictional just made the film work even more than it could have if it was trying to be real.
Yeah, I guess that way as well. You don't step on any toes, do you? No one sort of kicks off about it about being a stereotype, because there are moments where it's you've got James Earl Jones and Eddie Murphy's characters in Africa just like walking, and a zebra will run past or an elephant will run past, and I guess you could say, oh well, it's stereotypical. You're going to have all these African animals just running past the scene. So I guess making it a fictional place doesn't step on any toes. But speaking of James Earl Jones, we need to talk about Darth Vader himself, Mufasa himself, whatever you want to call him. He is fantastic in this film. He is everything you need from this film. And he's one of those aspects that keeps the film grounded. And I think for like a comedy to work, you do need that element where, not to say he's like wholly serious in the film, because he does have some funny lines and funny moments himself, but he can't, those moments sort of come at the expense of him being a very serious character and patriarchal character. I mean, he's James Earl Jones. Like, the guy just opens his mouth. He just commands the scene. Every single film that he's in, every single voice work. There are lines that me and you both said that Vader could say in this film. Is like, bring my son to me, or something like that. And it's just, I can't say enough positive words about James Earl Jones. And I'm so glad as well that they managed to get him for the sequel as well. I don't expect him to be in the sequel loads, but he is in the trailer. But just the fact that they managed to get him back, he's just a powerhouse of an actor, isn't he? Just absolutely dominates the scene when he's on there.
Yeah, and it's amazing that, I'm not saying the power of one voice, but even seeing him is like, that's a king. You look at him and think, it's the posture, it's the mannerisms, everything like that. Is a guy you do not want to piss off. And then he'll say one word. It doesn't matter what the word he's going to say. It's just like, oh my God, it's Darth Vader. And it works so well. And I think that's what makes him so great, that, James Jones has done a lot of theatre. He's more of a theatre actor than films. That's where he's made to history. And before Star Wars, all of that stuff, one of the most exceptional actors in across many decades, sorry. And bringing him in for a film to be the dad of not just this character, but Eddie Murphy, who's probably at the time, the biggest comedian in the entire world. You need someone that, if they tell off Eddie Murphy, it's not going to be this sort of, this really pathetic, shivering sort of, I'm standing in the corner because we're afraid of Eddie Murphy. That's James Earl Jones. And I think the dynamic of those two when they have scenes of one another is so well. Again, it comes down to that casting. And it's also a thing that great actors can do comedy. I think there's always been that discussion in the past where, some people say that not every Oscar winner could go and do a comedy and work. You get a lot of cringy ones, and not every comedian can go and do a serious film, but the best ones can always do both genres, because comedy isn't something easy, especially for those that do those dramas or those deeper films. And I think seeing him in this, even at moments, he's just smiling, and even the smile kind of scares you a little bit, because he's being nice, but it's the way he plays it. And I think what works with his character is even the ensemble of all the other characters. Again, the rose throwers, he's got Oha, the person that sings around him. He's got his wife as well. And I think you can tell he's having a really good time filming this film. Like, it feels as if, from what we've said about the sort of, I was going to say Max Landis, no, John Landis. From what you think about Landis and reading about Eddie Murphy, none of that portrays into this, because it just looks like one of those kind of sets where, I'm not going to get into endgame territory, but you want to be like, imagine if you were just there for a day seeing all these people, seeing us acting, like, you'd think they'd be having the time of their lives filming it, and maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but it shows so well that it's, I don't want to say family film, I think it's quite adult, but it's got family elements, but it's just an outright great comedy.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to not just specifically James Earl Jones, but like the costumes as well. It's like when he rocks up and he's got like a lion slung over his shoulder. It's like, that's the Lion King right there. But just all the stuff on Zamunda as well just looks great. Like the amount of extras they had. I do want to say, I think the palace is a concept art, which I loved. It sort of like zooms in on this concept art palace. I don't know if it was, maybe it was a miniature, but I love stuff like that. That's why I love 80s films. The music as well, the opening music, I wanted to talk about the soundtrack. So the actual score of the film, Nile Rodgers, he was the guy who did the music to Beverly Hills Cop 3. And obviously used some of the music that had come before it in the first two. But the one that stuck out to me was the opening title music. It's one of I've only really heard them on a Paul Simon album. It's a group of sort of like African choir group called Ladysmith Black Mombasa. And they do sort of like a rendition of The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Great. Just anything done by them, just the sound's brilliant. It just immediately throws you into that scene as well. Maybe somewhat of a cliche song. I think they actually wrote the song originally, to be honest, that group. But that just immediately sets the scene. I love that culture and the music from that culture as well. So that was sort of like a great introduction. The rest of the music in the film, it's just, that's not the focus, and it shouldn't be the focus. I'm trying to think of any other things to say about this film. It's weird. It's like, this is probably going to be one of our shortest retro reviews that we've done, and I love this film, but it's, with comedies, there's really not much to talk about. A bit that I'll throw out, the Soul Glow stuff I thought was brilliant. The hair commercial. I think Nile Rodgers, the guy who did the music to this film, he said that that's one of his proudest moments, was coming up for the music, the jingle of that commercial that crops up throughout the film of Soul Glow. And you've got this singer on there. I can't remember who does the singing of it, but it almost sounds like Prince, like these really sort of like high screaming, screechy vocals. I just thought it was brilliant. And I think it only cuts through it like maybe 2 or 3 times, but that was one of my favorite running jokes throughout the film.
Yeah, and it's the fact with the Soul Glow as well that some of the characters are wearing it, and it's very much at the core of it, sort of, not even speaking about how great the film is, that there is a genuine story in there with the comedic effect that he's someone that wants someone to love him for who he is, not because of what he is. And I like that dynamic with the girlfriend, and then you bring in the sort of not jealous boyfriend type, but you've got that dad that wants the money, and everyone's got their own character arcs. I think that's where the comedy comes from. But the hair stuff, the advert's amazing. It starts as the TV in the window, and then it becomes the film, and then you realize that the ultimate other character is wearing it, and then it's Eddie Murphy saying, should I try and have it too? And the dynamic they have trying to go through those scenarios just makes it so much funnier. It is really hard to make comedies, especially when it's an outright comedy as well, not a film that's sort of, it's funny, move on. No, it's one of those where there's a classic for a reason, and I think sort of talking in that sense that one of the reasons why this has stood the test of time is because I don't think there are films like this. We spoke about Thor in a video that's coming out soon, actually. I should have said that. You get that sort of, I forgot the term, when something's out of place. It's like a whole new world type thing. And coming to America is that kind of set standard now for if you want to take a fish out of water, that's the term.
Yeah.
It is that you want to do it in this effect where it's so different, it's so funny, but everything feels natural, and that's all down to me, is the characters, the writing, and the story content, which is Eddie Murphy. If he wasn't an African king, it could be some really deep drama, but the fact they are so overboard on every possible scenario, the $500,000 earrings and all that kind of stuff, I just think it all builds up and makes it so much funnier.
Yeah, it's a film where just everything's going for it. It knows exactly what it is, what it needs to do, the character types and tropes that need to be in there, and it does it well. And it's the comedy that shines through. It's these wacky characters. Arsenio, when they're in the club, and it does the montage of them speaking to all the girls, and then you've got Arsenio Halls dressed as this woman at the end. It's just hilarious. It's just all the characters that come out of it. And this was a really successful film as well. So this was done on a budget of 36 mil, not particularly a lot. Maybe it was a lot at the time, but even for a film back then, I don't think that was necessarily a lot. And it made somewhere between like 280, 350 mil. And this is, the term cult following is thrown around a lot, but it's definitely very much tied to this film. A lot of people like this film. A lot of people recommend this as sort of like one of the best comedy films, especially of that decade as well. It's one that always gets mentioned. So I'm very glad that I can finally cross it off and say that I've watched it beginning to end and not piecemeal. Apparently, I've just read as well, there was a 1989, so 1 year after this film came out, there was a pilot that was planned for a spin-off TV series. Seems like that's a running theme as well with Eddie Murphy properties, especially like Beverly Hills Cop. A pilot's going to be made for a TV show, and then it never happens, and then so many years later we get a sequel to it. So, and the last thing I'll throw out is how much money Eddie Murphy made on this film. So again, this is according to Wikipedia. Eddie Murphy received... Oh, go on. Yeah, have a go.
28 million.
Not quite that much. He received a personal salary. Well, he may have done, actually. Depends. Now I'm reading this. He received a personal salary of $8 million for his work on the film, plus 15% of film rentals. So I don't know how much that would work out to. In comparison, Landis received $600,000 plus 10% of gross receipts. So I don't know who wins that at the end.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good battle. Gross receipts, because that's a lot of money. But rentals as well, 80s VHS at home, and that's interesting. I love stuff like that. I know it's all money and it's all the same world, but I think when you hit the 90s, that's the outright, here's 30 million, no more percentages. Just take the 30 million and go. Whereas back then it was all the percentages, and I think I'm not going to say that all started with Alec Guinness, but I think once that happened on Star Wars, there was a ripple effect for a lot of productions. Like, oh, But if it's the big hit, you're guaranteed. So
I know there was like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Batman and Robin had a big. I think Jim Carrey for Ace Ventura 2 recently had Robert Downey Jr. with that percentage deal for the Marvel films. So it always happens. It crops up every now and then. But when you've got a star like Eddie Murphy, I guess he dictates. He wants however many zeros at the end of that paycheck to bring him on board. But I think I've said everything I can on Coming to America. I definitely recommend people checking this out, especially with the new one coming out later this week. Go back and check this out. I do think it's a really, really good comedy film. And even if you like Eddie Murphy's films like Nutty Professor or Norbit, where he does play all these characters, this was basically, I want to say, the first one that did it. So go and check this film out. And yeah, I guess now we can talk about the sequel. Not properly. We will be back later this week at some point, depending on if and when we get to see the film. This week, we will have a review out for Coming to America, the long-awaited, I guess we can say, sequel to this film. Trailers have come out for it. I'm going to reserve judgment until I see the film. But after watching this one now, I'm going to say hyped, because it's not the kind of film that I would get hyped for, but I'm way more interested now going into 2. Now I have full context and I have watched the original. So we don't know what day that review is coming out, but do subscribe to our channel and look out for that. This was really good fun to talk about this one today. Obviously, we're pre-recording this. This will be going up on Tuesday. And we have a lot of other content coming out. So I guess this is where we can talk about everything else that's coming out. This Thursday, so 2 days' time, we will have Cinema Savvy Awards series continuing. Oh, God, which one will we be doing? It will be Best Foreign Language Film. Yeah, sorry. We're recording so many things in advance now. I'm like, which week are we on? So we've got that coming out. We have the season finale of WandaVision, which is going to be absolutely huge. That's coming this Friday. We'll be live every week, as we have been, 8 p.m. GMT. On that same day, I don't have a time for this. I'll be doing a live watch-along of Raya and the Last Dragon. A review for that will be out on this Sunday. We don't have little annotations for those coming up, but I'm just trying to process everything else we've got coming out. I think that's it. George, big series coming out. It will be out probably by this point, I think. You know the dates. What have we got coming out?
Yes, so the Infinity Saga retrospective. At the time of this comes out, it started last night with Iron Man 1. It's going to be a video every Monday and Wednesday and Saturday. As Chris is kind of pointing out, we're pre-recording everything. We don't even know what week it is anymore. We're planning so far ahead. I keep forgetting it's actually March, and I still can't process it's actually March, because we've got stuff planned right now until the end of April. Everything's building up towards the end of April, so excuse us if we get our dates wrong a couple of times over the next few weeks, but that is starting out at the time of this going up. Tomorrow night is going to be the Incredible Hulk, so do join in for that one, because everyone loves the Incredible Hulk, right? It's not the one of the 23 that didn't get put in Disney Plus. No, I don't know. As well as that, we also, as Chris said, have WandaVision starting up in a couple of weeks. Is going to be Falcon and the Winter Soldier, of course, coming to America. And we'll also chuck in next week's retro review. I think we like doing these. We've kind of, I don't want to say we've finished with the Eddie Murphy ones. I think me and you both would love to do some more down the line, but that line isn't the line coming up in March. They're the ones we're going to be seeing in the next couple of weeks. We're heading, I don't want to say back to the 90s. I've only been there once. But we're gonna get into the 90s a bit more. So next Tuesday, the 9th of March, we're gonna be reviewing Face Off, the absolute iconic classic that is a must see. So Face Off's coming next week, and if I'm just gonna leave that here, that's a sign of things to come, right? 90s action films.
Mm-hmm.
We've done a lot of 80s, we've done 80s comedies, but we're gonna get some more out of the way in the 90s. So join us next Tuesday night for that Face Off. If you want Nicolas Cage and John Travolta, then really there's no other comparison for the pair of them. But no, this has been a very different review, and because we've been waffling about so many different things, I keep forgetting even the really obvious ones. So we want you guys to comment below with us, obviously, your thoughts on Coming to America, but also get us on social medias, because there's too many videos for us to keep track of. We have a calendar now. We don't have a schedule. So that's Facebook Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy, letterboxd.com/Cinema Savvy, and of course our TeePublic link is in the description below. And as this is Coming to America, comment your thoughts below, not just on this film, but on Eddie Murphy as a comedian. Where do you rank him compared to some of the others? And of course, let us know if you are excited for the new Coming to America film. It's been a long journey waiting for it. It got delayed a lot from Corona, ended up getting sold to Amazon. So if you really want to stream it, Amazon Prime this Friday, the 5th of March.
Absolutely. So big thank you to everyone that's watched this review, commented along, and we'll see you on the next video. Take care, everyone.